my name is Tori, this is Novel Life, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to another fun video that you guys actually picked. So sometimes I will post on my community tab where I'm like, hey, I have 2 ideas. Which one do you want to see this week? Or which one do you guys want to see next? And you guys picked that you wanted to see fantasy romances that are must reads. I had this video idea to choose 5 fantasy romances that I think you should read before the end of the year. You have time to read these. They're on the kind of shorter side. I mean, they're kind of long, but they're also a little bit on the shorter side compared to like a 1,000-page fantasy. And then I have 5 fantasy romances that I want to read before the end of the year. So I did do a 10 before the end, and like 3 books were in that video, but I wanted to start with the fantasy romance recommendations that I think you should read before the end of the year. We have less than 50 days left, but you can do it if you're trying to meet your goal. First one is Metal Slinger by Rachel Snyder. This is actually the most recent fantasy romance that I've read. Let me tell you, I was just blown away by this book. I was blown away with the everything. I was blown away with the introduction, the characters, our female character, how strong she is, what she's going through. I love our hero. I love this like found family aspect a little bit, but also like very like broken. I loved the plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. I cannot really talk about this book without giving really anything away. But the thing that I will say is, this book opens up, you see that there's kingdoms, and there's one kingdom that is completely alienated to water. Like they live on basically like a man-made island. And you see that they, once a year, certain soldiers can go to like this port area, which is like on the coast, and they can like trade things and walk around. It's like a market and stuff like that, and they could do that. Well, that's when all hell breaks loose. Basically, a war breaks out between both kingdoms, and you see that our female character is right in the middle of that. So yeah, it's very interesting. You see that she did not actually steal something, which causes the war to break out, and you see how that kind of like unravels all of this stuff. I so enjoyed this book. I do know that there is an audiobook on the way. I don't know when it's going to come out, but when it comes out, you bet I will be rereading this book, because I need to know, like, I need to just highlight and annotate. It's one of those books where I'm like dying to annotate. This is one of those. The next one I want to mention is more of like a gothic fantasy read, which I really enjoyed, and it's called Anathema. I think that's how you pronounce it, by Carrie Lake. A lot of people have been reading this. A lot of people have been loving this. This is a, like I said, gothic fantasy. It's one of those fantasy romances where you have like our female character, she is living in what they call a human world that has like some magical elements, and then you see our hero, he's living in like what I would call like the magic world, where it's like prevalent and everyone knows about it and stuff like that. So there's a veil in between both worlds. So it's interesting that I haven't read a fantasy romance in a while where there was a veil and that they have to, one character has to cross to the other. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think that she did actually a really good job kind of like balancing both of those worlds and explaining it at the beginning. It is a little heavy considering it's her first fantasy romance, but I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars, so it's one that I would highly suggest. I think it's perfect for the fall winter. It's all the gothic vibes that I love, so if you're a gothic girly like me and you love that, definitely check out this book. It was so good. Another one that I loved and I read, I think in September if I'm not mistaken, is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. So this one is more so fantasy romance, but like in a like paranormal kind of setting. It's interesting. You see our female character, she's a necromancer. She has to take over her family's power after her mother passes away, and so like she takes on that kind of like head of the family role that's passed down from woman to woman. And you see that her sister, who is your younger sister, goes into what she thinks is, I think it's just called Phantasma. It's like a cursed manor, and there's like these trials and games, which I always say this, I hate trials and games in fantasy romances, except when it's done uniquely well. Like I can't just do the normal trials and stuff like that. It has to be like very unique. It has to have a unique setup, a unique premise, and this one is. If I could sell you on one thing, if you watched Danny Phantom as a kid, which I did, love that show, our hero is giving all the Danny Phantom vibes. I love this one so much. Our female character is so strong though, and I just love like an independent, strong female character, but she realizes when she needs help. I love that. Like that is a common reoccurrence in all the fantasy romances I am going to give you as a rec, but yeah, this is one so good. Another one that was recently re-released, so it was originally indie published, but now it is traditionally published, is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. I love the hardback. I think it's so pretty with the like foiling and stuff like that. I love the end pages and stuff like that. This fantasy romance is the first book, and I think a series. No, there's 3 books. No, there's 4 books in the series. I think she said there's gonna be 4 books in the series. The second book is re-releasing traditionally published wise in December. So these are like I say relatively short books for fantasy romances, but like this one's less than 400 pages, which I think for a fantasy romance is on the shorter side, because you have like all the world building, the character building, character introductions, and all of that stuff. I love this book. I only read the first 2 books in the series before they were picked up, and I was like, okay, pause, we'll wait. I'll wait to read the 3rd book once it's traditionally published. So I've read the first 2 already, indie published. I do want to reread them because I think they're just so fun. It's like a easy introduction to our female character who is super strong. She's finding out things about her life that her father supposedly told her that is completely different than what she's been told, like from what her mother was saying. Our hero in this, Luther, is one of my favorite parts of the first 2 books, I will say, because I read both of those. He is one of my, like, literally one of my favorite parts of it. Like, if you love a slow burn, I literally mean the slowest of slow burn fantasy romances, this series is for you. And that's not to deter, it's not to deter some people. The romance is still there, but they're just like towing around each other. The chemistry is off the charts. I loved it. I loved it so much. And another book that I want to recommend is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. So I read this book the first day of the year. It was my first book of the year when it was indie published, and I gave it 5 stars. And it recently re-released traditionally published wise, which is why it's in this hardcover. And the map on the inside is colored, and it is so pretty. I annotated the heck out of this book recently in a weekly vlog. I love my reread. If you are someone who loves like mental health rep in your fantasy romances, our female character goes through a lot of anxiety attacks, and you see that she struggles with anxiety, and I love the representation in this book. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's definitely one I think a lot of people need to pick up before the end of the year. I just think it's such a good introduction to the world. Yes, it ends on a cliffhanger, but there is dragons. You see our female character. She was taken away as a child from her kingdom because her father was like abusing her and stuff like that, physically keeping her away from her dragons, not letting her use her power. He thought she was a danger to him, like usurp him and stuff like that in his kingdom. So her uncle takes her away and puts her in this kingdom that's been hidden, and that's where she's grown up. And now she's like, I'm ready. I need to make alliances. I need to get my dragons back. And she does that with a rival kingdom. And that's when you meet our hero, who is her equal in every way, and he realizes that she's his equal in like combat, smart, like strategicness, all of that stuff. It is such a good fantasy romance. I want everyone to read that. It's like the fantasy romance of the year is probably one of these. Now I'm gonna get into the 5 fantasy romances I personally want to read before the end of the year. So one is, I just was actually sent from Berkeley. It is a debut fantasy romance, and I think the audiobook is coming in soon. It's The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. So yeah, it was pitched as a wandering fortune. It says a wandering fortune teller finds an unexpected family in this warm and wonderful debut fantasy. Perfect for readers of Travis Baldree. So yeah, I just thought this cover was absolutely stunning, and if you know me, if you have a pretty cover, I will read it. Hands down, I will read it, and I will give it a try. Thank you so much to the publisher for sending this. I literally cannot wait to read it. Literally cannot. So that's definitely one I definitely want to get to. Another one that I have physically is The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. I'm waiting for my audiobook to come in. I have 6 weeks left, okay, which is literally all we have left before the end of the year, but I will read this at some point. This is a gothic fantasy, darkly wondrous, scrumptious gothic, ornate, and rapturing. Like, that's all the praise that it's gotten. A haunting, deeply romantic tale of life and death. Sold! That's all I want to know. That's all I want to know about this book. I love it. The gold edges are gorgeous. It's a pretty, I got the Barnes & Noble edition because it's pretty, and I'm a sucker for a pretty book. So yeah, this is just a gothic fantasy that I want to get to. Another one I want to read soon is one that recently just came out, and that is Throne of Secrets by Carrie Maniscalco. So I'm also waiting for my audiobook to come in, but I might just have to pick this up physically. I have like 12 weeks for the audiobook. Oh, I hate loans from the library. Sometimes they just take forever. Like, there's only 1 copy going around for this book. I'm like, this book is so anticipated for a lot of people. Like, why do we only have 1 copy? Why? Anyway, I'm so excited. This is Gluttony's book, and that's all I know. Like, the prince was indeed furious. He loomed over me, eyes flashing. Axton was formidable when he chose to be. Dark, dangerous. His gaze penetrating deep enough to pierce your soul. So yes, I'm very excited for this one. Very, very excited. I want to read it because I had such a fun time with Throne of Secrets. So I definitely want to get to this one as soon as possible. The other one I want to get to is The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. So I know this is a little bit older of a fantasy. I have the audiobook from my library out. I just heard people saying that it was such a good book. I literally don't know anything about this book. I don't know if you could tell me a little bit about it. I just saw people were saying it's one of the best books they've read. It was so good. It kept them out of a reading slump, and I love books like that. If I hear praise like that, I'm like, oh, I want to read it for sure. I definitely want to read it. So this one's been on my TBR for the past like month or two. I just haven't mentioned it because I didn't know if the audiobook was going to come in time, like before the end of the year. So this is one I want to read, and if I do love it, then I will buy the hardback and or paperback, but I just want to get to it because I love the cover too. And the last one is literally coming out on the 19th, so a week from today when I'm filming this. So November 19th is when this book comes out, which probably is when I will go to Barnes & Noble to pick it up. It is The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. So a lot of people are confused with this series, the Crowns of Nyaxia series, because she already has 2 books out in that series and a novella. So the novella can be read as a standalone. I read it in between the 2 books, but the first 2 books that are out already, which are, why can't I think of it? Oh, The Serpent and the Wings and Night and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. That is a duet by itself in this series. She has 3 duets that are going to be in this series. Songbird and the Heart of Stone is the first in a duet in this series, which is a little confusing that she kind of did that, because like if you don't understand, like as a reader, like I understand it, but some people might not. But so yes, this apparently does end on a cliffhanger, which I'm okay with. I go into fantasy romances always thinking that there's going to be a cliffhanger because it's usually how it goes. But this is literally such an anticipated read for me that I'm actually terrified. I am terrified. Like I want to read it like as soon as it comes out, but I'm like, do I need to read it before it comes out? Like what if it's absolute trash? Do you ever get like that where you have like an anticipated release and you're like, but I want to read it, but what if it's horrible? Like what if it turns out to be like a dud? That's gonna like ruin my week. So anyway, those are the 5 fantasy romances that I definitely have to read before the end of the year. If I don't get to these before the end of the year, I'm gonna cry. I also have way more other fantasy romances on my TBR, but you know, we're starting with these. So if you see a weekly vlog where I just read a bunch of fantasy romances, don't judge. I'm trying to get through the TBRs that I've set for myself. But you can let me know a fantasy romance in the comments down below that you would love for me to read before the end of the year. And you can let me know one that's on your TBR before the end of the year. So yeah, drop that in the comments down below if you've made it this far. Leave me the sparkle emoji, like the sparkle emoji. Do you know what I mean? Like with the 3 stars, the sparkle. I love using that one for fantasy romances. If you made it this far, drop that in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content from me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys!